Mishpucha, it's Courtney, America's Jewish mother. Welcome back to my channel. It's Friday, so that means it's time for another Friday Reads video. And in this past week, I finished 2 books, and I DNF'd a book, and I'm currently reading 4 books, so let's go. So the first book I finished was an audiobook that I was listening to by Kiese, Laymon, Heavy, an American Memoir. This was really good. I recommend the audiobook. It's narrated by the author himself, and it basically gives an account of his childhood, being the only son of a single mother in Jackson, Mississippi, all the way up through his becoming an academic, and eventually teaching at Vassar. And yeah, I thought it was really powerful. Laymon makes a very interesting and what I felt like was a compelling argument for the combination of systemic racism in the United States with trauma that he suffered in his own childhood, both physical and sexual abuse. So the combination of those two forces for his later need to punish himself, as he refers to it. So he sort of like internalized this trauma, and it finds its outlet in his eating, and either rapidly gaining or rapidly losing weight through extreme eating or extreme exercise, and also a gambling addiction that he is very forthcoming about. That also seems perhaps somewhat heritable because his mother also had a gambling addiction that he also speaks very openly about. The memoir is addressed as if he's like writing a very long letter to his mother, and so it's in second person and says you, and when it says you, it's talking about his mother. So it had a very intimate quality about it for that reason. And yeah, this was just a really good memoir. I really appreciated his examination of these forces of both systemic racism but also interpersonal trauma in childhood. And then even though it's about Laymon's own personal life, I feel like it kind of serves as a metaphor for the relationship of the United States to people of color more broadly, and so I think that's why it's probably subtitled Heavy, an American Memoir. It's not an easy read, as implied by the title. Its subject matter is quite heavy, and as I already suggested, it does deal with both physical and sexual abuse. It also deals with eating disorders and, you know, addictive behaviors like gambling and like exercise compulsion. So content warning for any of that stuff. But yeah, this was a really excellent memoir. It is the best memoir I've read since Tara Westover's Educated. So highly recommend it if you read nonfiction and you like memoir. 4.5 stars. The second book I finished this week was The Travelers by Regina Porter. This was gifted to me by Lindsay in our holiday book exchange last year. And basically this book tells the story of 2 interconnected families, one black, one white, from about the mid-20th century up through President Obama's first term, so, you know, up through about like 2010 or so. And there are a lot of characters in this book. She gives you a cast of characters at the beginning that goes on to a second page, and there's at least 30 people in that list, and that's not even everyone who's in the book. So that was a little bit daunting, not gonna lie. And it essentially sort of reads like a series of interconnected short stories because every chapter focuses primarily on one person, and sometimes they always come up again at some point, but sometimes they get a second chapter later on devoted to them and sometimes not. And so I like the idea of this book, but I feel like because I'm such a character-driven reader, I didn't get to spend enough time with any of these characters to feel really attached to them or invested in their stories, especially because this is only about a 300-page book, and again, we have like a rotating cast of 30-plus characters. Not that you see something from all of their perspectives, but you know, I had a hard time kind of keeping track of who everybody was. I feel like maybe an actual like family tree or genealogy rather than just a list of all the characters might have been helpful on that point for me, but who knows. And yeah, and I liked some of the characters more and was interested in them more than others. There was this woman named Eloise who was an African-American lesbian who was like very admiring of Bessie Coleman and eventually becomes a pilot herself. I thought her story was really interesting, but we really only see it in maybe 2 chapters. And then there's this other guy, Eddie Christie, who is a Vietnam vet, and he makes Tom Stoppard's play Rosencrantz and Guildenstern kind of like, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead, excuse me, kind of like his life's Bible in a way. And I found him an interesting figure, but I wanted to know more about why he was so drawn to this play, and I feel like I never really got an answer to that. But whatever. So I would recommend it if you like, say, multi-generational family stories, and if you don't mind, you know, having a rotating cast of characters, if that's something that speaks to you in novels. But for me, it didn't quite work. I liked the idea of the novel more than I liked the execution, so I ended up giving it 3.25 stars. Which brings me to the DNF for this week. So the book that I DNF'd this past week was Celestial Bodies by Jokha Al-Harthi, and I hated to DNF it because I picked it up for the Reading Women, for a Reading Women Challenge prompt, which is to read an Arab author in translation, and Celestial Bodies is already the 2nd book that I've tried to use to fulfill that prompt, and both of the books that I've picked up to try to fulfill that prompt of reading an Arab author in translation, I have DNF'd. The first one being Farewell Damascus, which I read about half of earlier this year and DNF'd it because the writing was just terrible. So, but Celestial Bodies, the reason I DNF'd it, I got maybe about 1/3 of the way into it, is because it has that same sort of style of like a rotating cast of characters and you keep getting different people's perspectives, and you know, I had just grown tired of that because I had been reading The Travelers, and you know, I was pretty far along in Travelers and I was close to finishing it, and I just did not want to like be in another novel that had that same feel to it, because I just feel like when a novel does that, it's probably not going to be higher than about a 3, maybe 3.5 star read for me at the most, and I was just like, I can't deal with this again. So it's not that the book was bad, it's just that I personally do not respond to that style of having this big rotating cast of characters, and looking at the table of contents for it, it looked like it was going to sort of carry that throughout the whole book, even though it you know, sort of primarily focuses on the lives of these 3 sisters in Oman, and the choices that they make over time, but yeah, it looked like we were just going to get a ton of perspectives, and I was just like, nope, can't deal with this again. So I DNF'd it. So there's an example of a DNF where it's not that the book was bad, it just was not the book for me, and definitely not at this particular moment in time. So okay, so that's all the stuff that I finished or DNF'd this week. So on to currently reading. So I'm still working my way through the essential writings of Ralph Waldo Emerson. I'm over 300 pages in this now, which I'm very excited about. So this is still a thing that's happening. Still don't foresee any reason why I wouldn't finish that by the end of the year. I also started Daniel Silva's The Rembrandt Affair, which is the 10th book in the Gabriel Allon series. I'm about 50 pages into this, so we've pretty much set up the main plot point, and you know, how Gabriel's going to get drawn back into yet another mission for the office that he doesn't want to be involved in, because that's like the whole series, right? So this is going well, and I imagine it will be a pretty fast-paced, plotty book, because most of these are. So I also picked up another audiobook to listen to, which is The Plot by Hanff Korelitz, and actually had a decent amount of time to listen to this last night because the power went out here for about 3 hours, and it was already getting on into evening by the time the power went out, and yeah, so I didn't have really daylight to read by anymore, and I hate reading by candlelight. It's so rough on my eyes. But my laptop was fully charged, and I had already downloaded this audiobook, and so thankfully I had enough battery power in my laptop that I listened to the plot for, you know, at least probably 2 hours. And that was good. So, so I'm like, you know, not quite 20% of the way into it. And it's about this writer at, who teaches at a college, and he teaches in an MFA program, a low residency MFA program. And he comes across this student who, even though the student is in the, you know, in his creative writing classes, he seems very defensive and protective about the plot of a novel he's working on. And he's like, you know, no, you don't understand. This is like a really great plot, and, you know, whenever I finish writing this, it's going to be like, you know, optioned into a movie, and it's going to be on Oprah's book club list, and like, it's just so good you don't even know, right? And the protagonist of the story is kind of like, okay, whatever, kid. So he won't talk about it in class, but then when he comes to see the protagonist during his office hours to talk about part of the story that this guy has submitted, the student reveals to him the whole plot, and the protagonist of the story is like, oh my god, this guy is right. This is going to be amazing. And that's pretty much as far as I've gotten so far, so more on that later. And then the last book I'm currently reading is an ebook, which is The Body Is Not an Apology by Sonya Renee Taylor. My yoga studio where I practice here in Athens has started a book club, which I'm very excited about, and this is the first pick for it for August. So this is a book about body positivity, and I am not quite halfway through it. I think maybe 40-45% of the way through it. And it's interesting, but yeah, more thoughts when I actually have finished it. So that's everything that I either finished this week or I'm currently reading. If you have thoughts about any of this stuff, I would love to hear that. Please feel free to let me know that down in the comments below. Thank you for watching this. I hope everyone is staying healthy and well. I hope you're doing good reading whatever you're reading. And until next time, what do you call your mother?